Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again, and thank you very much as always for taking the time to join me today. And today I am literally beyond thrilled to be joined by the founder and CEO of the Borden Group, Melanie Borden, who is here to share her insights on individual and organisational excellence via superior brand messaging and awareness. Melanie and her team excel in transforming challenges into powerful personal and corporate brand opportunities. Leveraging her extensive background as a marketing executive, Melanie has crafted innovative strategies to align real-life expertise with LinkedIn presence, unlocking potential for founders, C-suites, and executives. Her comprehensive expertise spans from building in-house agencies and reputational management to enhancing digital footprints through social media and advertising processes. As a testament to her influence, she has been featured in prominent outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, LA Weekly, Good Morning America, and is a respected Forbes Agency Council member. Now, Melanie is absolutely one of the key people that I personally follow on LinkedIn. And through that journey, we were just chatting before we started recording there, and through the journey, I've realised that on a personal side that we share the same passion for running as others do. And sometimes when I see Melanie posting about running, she puts a caveat in there of an apology. I'm sorry to the runners in here, but I love it, so you're going to read this post anyway. But also making it a family affair, and some of the more recent post that I've seen is Melanie running with her daughters and such as well. I do the exact same with Leo. Well, we start at the same time. He finishes much earlier than I do, and then we get a photograph at the end as if we ran together. But just seeing that connection with your family, doing something that you love, is just something that makes me admire Melanie all the more. Melanie, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you for that introduction. That was incredible.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Hopefully the questions are the same. So I'm very interested in your journey overall, Melanie, in terms of you weren't always an entrepreneur. And I know some of this from the history that I've been able to garner from your posts on LinkedIn. But you had a life in corporate land, and then you decided to move at a time when you thought that was the right thing for you, which to me is really a story of foresight and creating opportunity and absolute bravery. Can you tell myself and the readers how it all unfolded for you?
Sure. Well, first, I'll say that I come from a family that my parents were second generation Russian immigrants.
Right.
So their parents and so forth have brought down this work ethic in my family. I mean, you started working at a very young age in my family.
Yeah.
And I grew up during a time that was very different from right now, where you just didn't have all the access to everything. I mean, all the things that kids see today, I mean, you know this as well. I mean, growing up in the 80s and the 90s was very, very different
Yeah.
than it is now.
Yeah.
And so I've been working since I was 12 years old. And
Yes.
so it was just kind of like if I wanted anything beyond what my parents could provide to me, I had to get a job and I had to work.
Yeah.
So that meant doing all different types of things. And most of my life, I wouldn't have considered myself an entrepreneur at all. It was really until the pandemic happened where that's really when I realized that I had to make a decision. So I was working for someone else. I was working as the VP of marketing, and I was not happy with what was happening, as many people weren't very happy with what was going on in the world.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot of insecurity. I felt a lot of just overall not knowing what was going to be next. And then when most of the company I worked for got laid off, I realized that something had to change. And that meant something that I had to do had to change.
Yeah.
And it was something that I had helped promote and managed all of our businesses, marketing and advertising, where I was currently at the time when I was working for someone else. I also was working not necessarily as a publicist, but anything that was relating to media with my former CEO, I would help work on as well. So the world of personal brand wasn't unfamiliar to me until it became a necessity for myself. And that's really when I started making a decision of I'm seeing what's happening on LinkedIn. I'm seeing where it's going. I was not active on any other social platforms at all. And I just made the decision to start posting on the platform. And that's really what started the entrepreneurial process because it opened up all these opportunities to me that didn't exist,
Yeah.
or they might have existed. I just wasn't able to get them from the lens and from the viewpoint that I was sitting at the time.
Yeah. And how intentional, obviously you said that LinkedIn was the only platform that you have a presence in or had a presence in at
Right.
the time. How intentional were you about, I'm going to really up my game here, continue with the posting, be as relevant as I can be? Was there an end game that you had there to see what type and style of feedback you would get, what type and style of engagement?
That's a great question. So there was an event that we were going to be holding. It was actually, I think it was on St. Patrick's Day when we were actually holding the event in 2020. And the event was canceled because of this overseas virus.
Oh,
So I want to say it was March 17th, 2020. And the event was canceled. And while I was at the event, now this event was for a launch. I was working in automotive retail. So I was on the corporate team, but the group that I was working for had 6 luxury auto brands.
yeah.
Plus, the CEO had a real estate development company. Plus, he had his own media. Plus, he had a startup and all these other things that were cooking at the same time that I was helping the marketing for. So when the event got canceled, it was within several days that the team was pretty much consistently laid off as well.
Yeah.
So, except for the essential team, which at the time in New Jersey where I was working, I was considered part of the essential team, which I was very lucky.
Yeah.
So, at that moment, I realized it was really that day when the event canceled, because then I realized that something was going to happen. And I really had done a great job networking myself in my industry, in the area that I lived in what they call the tri state area, New York City, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, all the Long Island, like that whole area of the country, I was really focused on, but I wasn't really focused on who else knows me from other parts of the country. How am
Mhm.
I going to get in front of all these people? I don't want to have to rely on headhunters and recruiters. And I certainly don't want to go call begging someone for a job. So, how do I make myself marketable to others? And
Yeah.
how do I grow as fast as possible? And so the time that I would have been spending commuting to the office, I was spending on getting my kids ready for virtual school
Yeah.
and focusing my efforts on LinkedIn. So my days became me focusing my entire work world around LinkedIn. And what was happening at the same time is other people were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Other people who, if you can remember at the time, other people who were going to an office were now homebound.
Yeah.
So everyone is now collaborating in this space where no one was really, not no one, but it wasn't as active as it had been in the past in
Mhm.
terms of what's happening, the activity and the engagement on the platform. And so I knew that on Instagram, I wasn't going to be able to see all the people in my industry and have access to them and be able to message them with them being able to see my messages, or
Mhm.
have the ability to start a conversation with a company that I would normally not have access to through their Facebook page
Yeah.
or through their Twitter, now X account. I knew that LinkedIn was the only way. And I had started seeing people who were posting as if it was Instagram or Facebook. And I thought, okay, it's going directly towards my career. Every piece of effort that I put into this thing will come back to me in some way. So I couldn't necessarily see the end game,
Yeah.
or I did not have the desire to work for myself either. At this point, I was still just focused
Right.
on how do I grow my name? How do I make sure that everybody knows who I am and what I do and the results I get and my career? And that was my focus.
Yeah.
So, what turned into my focus it just kept building and building and building. As you know, LinkedIn has grown and grown and grown.
Yeah.
So as someone who worked in marketing, really focusing on building the company brand and building my CEO's brand, I was now in a situation where people were now asking me to come on podcasts. People
Right.
were asking me to speak at virtual conferences, which then later turned into in-person conferences.
Yeah.
I was then getting asked, can you do for me what you did for yourself? From executives in other industries, because I was really only in the auto industry at the time. So all of a sudden, this veil opened, and I now had the ability to talk to those outside of the auto industry.
Yeah.
So it just created this momentum effect that I had no idea it was going to turn out the way that it did. I ended up finding another role, working for another company, similar but different. It was a tech company, same position, VP of marketing. But at that point, I felt that it was a goal of mine to work, at a B2B
Yeah.
SaaS tech company. That was it was a box I really wanted to check.
Yeah.
Well, after I checked the box, people became more focused on using LinkedIn to do something similar. They had a specific goal that they wanted to hit, and they needed help with getting towards their goal. So what I started doing was I started turning down all this business because I was working for someone else and I had a contract that would not allow me to work with anyone else because I was working for another company.
Yeah.
And a lot of times in that tech space, when you work for someone, you don't have a side business. That's the main job that you have. Whatever it is, whether it's 9 to 5 and then it becomes 5 to 9, that's the role and that's the world that you live in.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving. I did not have a plan at all. I had zero plan. My plan was I'm getting asked enough to help others with their brands. I could step in as a fractional. I can do anything with relation to marketing because that was the world that I have lived in.
Yeah.
Whether it was go to market, whether it was just building campaigns, advertising campaigns, or if it was something that was completely unrelated to online and they needed someone to buy media for them. I could do all of it because I was running an in-house agency that I built.
Yeah.
And so I took a leap of faith in August of 2021 and I never looked back. It was one of the best decisions I could have ever made. I had no idea what it was going to look like at the time, but I took the jump, and it just goes to show that when you set your mind to something and then you work towards it, anything magic can happen.
That's incredible. It really is. And how much do you think your marketing background, because in marketing, I don't know a lot about marketing. I'm certainly not an expert, but you are attuned to the types and styles of things that are being said, things that are not being said, the way they're not being said, to be able to create opportunity when possibly there was no opportunity there in the beginning. Is that the foundation of your ability to see the opportunity for you and what ultimately would become the Borden Group?
I think marketers in general, and I'm just going to generalize this because I know it applies to me and it definitely applies to others. It's very difficult for us to put ourselves in the lens of our clients, in a sense of it's so much easier to market someone else than to market yourself.
Yeah.
And so when someone comes to me now and they're looking for help on their positioning, there's a part of me that laughs and says, in 1 year, your positioning is going to be totally different. If you're open and willing to adjust and pivot to the market and what it needs, then a year from now, you would have repositioned yourself 2 or 3 times because you're just following what the market is dictating to you.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is a part of it that you just need to get started. And there is so many ways to write strategy and then all the tactics for execution. You have all of that and you can analyze it until, that old saying, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You can go through that in your life, in your career. You can do that, or you could just kind of put your blinders on and just start moving towards it. But what helped me was really putting myself in the shoes of my client, which at the time, going back to where I'd started was I had a boss at the time who I was working for, who I helped with his personal brand all the time. So being able to transfer that knowledge to myself. It wasn't easy to do, but it's something that if you want it bad enough, you can make it happen, regardless of the level of education you have. I mean, the internet is amazing because you can learn anything about anyone, anytime.
Yes, exactly. I teach at a local university here, and part of the course is about social media presence. It's all about it's not so much building their brand, but building their foundations for a successful career search and,
Right.
the abilities and tools and systems that would go with that. And when I say for the first time to the class, anything you put out there at any point, whether it's a voicemail, whether it's an email, whether it's a text message, whether it's a direct message, whether it's a post on social media, it's no longer yours. You
Right.
don't own it anymore. You don't have any ability to control how it's going to be received by the other people, and it can be used for good. It can be used for evil. You
Yeah.
just don't know. And typically, when I say that, you see their eyes going wide, and they're like, "What? That's
Yeah.
my property." And I'm saying, "Not when you
Dark
send it out
net.
there. It's not." So then it then provides. I mean, it's not that you can't come back from anything that you might have done or said or posted in the past, but you just need to be cognizant that, exactly to your point, that information will be somewhere that someone can go and say, "Is this you? Is this what you did? Is this what you said? Is this truly how you feel? Maybe you're not a good fit for our organization overall."
Right. And LinkedIn as a platform has been so hot recently. It has captured the attention of everyone. So the people who used to laugh at me and say, "What are you doing?
Yeah,
How could you even be thinking about this?" are now coming to me and saying, "Can you please show me how to do this?
yeah,
Because I can't figure this out."
yeah,
And so, for anyone who's just starting, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I always give to anyone is just not to think so much about it and just to make sure that you're doing and taking action.
yeah,
Because ultimately, even if it's a mess in the beginning, you can craft it and you can be intentional to what you want others to see
yeah,
versus letting somebody else dictate it for you, which
yeah,
is really what happens a lot of times at companies where they're so restricted and handcuffed as to what they can say, what they can post about, what they can do with their profile, that a lot of times people going in don't even realize that they could be protecting their personal brand as a part of their proprietary information
yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah, definitely. And it's such a, like, one of the key I mean, back to talking to the students again, is that opportunity to say, you get to, I mean, exactly as you said, you get to craft your message. You get to see, or show people what you want them to see, and be the best version of yourself. But you have to be authentic.
Right.
And what I've noticed is a lot, and it's not just the students actually in this occasion, and I think it really reinforces your point of just do something,
Yeah.
act, take action, and see. What I've said to them, I try to impress, is name one thing in your life that you have been brilliant at from the very, very moment that you started doing it. One thing, just one. And it's going to be a very short list, or that there's actually not going to be a list there in the first place. So trying to provide permission to say, no one's going to overly judge you. The main judge is going to be in between, your ears, and just do something. So one thing you mentioned earlier there, in terms of the people that you are now doing business with, you are now advising, you're now helping, weren't quite so understanding. Let's be super generous to them for right now. What sort of resistance did you feel in the beginning when you quit, without the plan, without the safety net, without the backup behind you?
It was very scary.
Yeah,
It was very scary, but it's a feeling that I would love to emulate over and over and over again because I know as a result where it's gotten me so far.
yeah,
It's interesting that you bring up fear, and there's a few things that happen to someone mentally when they are going to market for themselves, let's say, and put aside the company brand for now, but let's call it their personal brand.
yeah,
Okay, so there's a few things that I always tell clients that happen right away. Number one, you're going to have so many people who you haven't talked to or you haven't, engaged with or connected with in years. So it might be 15, 20 years that you haven't heard from that person. All of a sudden, they're there and they're supportive. And
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of really supportive people who are going to say, how can I help you? Because other people who have their own business are going to want to help you succeed and thrive too.
Yeah.
And there's generally not strings attached. It's just who can I make the introduction to?
Yeah.
Or how can I help you? Or is there anything that you need? So that's number one. And that could be even if you're working for somebody else,
Yeah.
you're going to still have those supportive people. Then you're going to have the people that are like, what are you doing? What are you up to? What are you working on? And they're going to want to take it from a lens of beyond curiosity, like they're trying to solve a puzzle.
Yeah.
So you have those. And they'll still be supportive, but they're going to have feedback for you and they're going to want to gossip a little and see what's going on. And those are the people also in an office. When you are working in an office, which many people do, they in the office are chitter chattering about what you're doing on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Then you have the people that will be very negative and they will not be supportive. They will not be helpful. They will not help you get to where you need to be. They will only reinforce all the fears that you have in your mind about what you're doing.
Yeah.
But the people who are positive and supportive on the other end of the spectrum will outweigh all of those people. And a lot of times it's their own insecurities that are really holding them back from being that supportive person.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that out of all three of those types of people that you'll encounter, you will also encounter new people who don't know you, who will fall into one of those three categories as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the negative ones are few and far between, but it's always, you could have 100 people commenting, and then there's the one person that says something negative that could throw the whole thing off.
Yeah.
So I like that term, putting the blinders on like a horse, because when a horse is running in a race, it's not looking at the other horses. It can't because it has its blinders on. And so it's very similar in a sense, but it's hard to do to compartmentalize negativity, especially from board members, executives where you work, your other colleagues and coworkers. It's very difficult to mentally take that, put it in a box and put it in your desk and close the drawer.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go through that.
Yeah. Would you say that that's a skill that you continually hone as you move forward, in terms of you obviously have a very large following on LinkedIn now, so with each of those buckets exponentially growing, the negative bucket will be one of those buckets that's growing. How do you have any strategies you can share where you address it in a way without ignoring it? You still have the blinkers on, or the blinders on, sorry, and
with your blinkers too.
Yeah. How do you do that over time? Because I can't imagine it gets any easier.
Listen, the more that you do anything, the more that anyone succeeds at anything, there's always going to be someone who has something to say that's not positive.
Yeah.
So I think having the understanding going in, and this is why I level set with people, just to really to take their temperature. And some people would say, well, why are you doing that? Well, because I think it's important, especially if we're investing, both of us, all this time together, that it's important that everyone understands what they're up against and what will happen, because it's not all perfect and roses. There's going to be hard conversations that you're going to have, whether it could be at work or at home or whatever the case is, that will come up. But it has been, I am numb to it at this point, to answer your question.
Right.
Nobody likes a death threat, which I have experienced, and I know others who have experienced it also.
Wow.
However, I look at this as it is very much real, but it's not real at the same time, because they don't know me.
Mm-hmm.
They only know what I'm willing to share.
Yeah.
And they only know what their perception of me is, which there's that saying, what other people think about you is none of your business.
Yes.
So for someone who is sensitive, which I am, and someone who cares what other people think, to a certain extent, I do too. But at the end of the day, I know that if I need to get to where I'm going, then I have to be okay with taking negative criticism. I have to be okay with getting negative feedback. I have to be okay with telling myself that this person doesn't know who I am as a parent. They don't know who I am as a person. They're just making a observation based on something that they've seen online.
Yeah.
And people are so unhappy in general, and they're so unhinged online that it's almost, you have to just laugh about it a little bit, which I've gotten pretty good at doing.
Yeah.
But I think telling yourself and just reinforcing your goals and your message to yourself is
Yeah.
something, and doing a mindset and just reframing things. If someone doesn't think that you're capable, like, I'm sorry that you have that limitation on yourself, but that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And just constantly having those reframes for yourself that you can remind. I mean, you could also have positive affirmations, which I'm a big believer in,
Mhm.
and consuming positive content, and also staying away from the people who you know aren't going to be supportive and you know who don't understand what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And if that is you going to market and having your own website and having a newsletter and posting on LinkedIn, then that's their issue. That's not yours, because it's something that you have made the decision yourself to move forward with. And it's okay if they're not okay with it, because it's
Yeah.
not for them, it's for you.
Yeah, such a lovely way to put it. Yeah, and I've seen. I don't spend a lot of time online. My preferred platform, like yours, is LinkedIn. But on the odd occasion that I venture out into to Facebook or wherever else, or if someone sends me something, like, people can be vicious, beyond vicious.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
not to the point of death threats. That's absolutely extreme. But there's various other forums I am for the sports team that I love from back home. I'll look at the forums, and the people. It's just obviously a venting mechanism or
Yeah.
outlet of them, but when it becomes directed at the work that you're doing, the endeavor you're putting in, the change, the impact you're trying to create, it can become derailing and
Yeah.
insulting, and distracting, of course.
And listen, not all negative feedback and criticism is a bad thing either, because a lot of times it can open your mind to someone else's perspective, to show
Yeah,
you or to be aware of something that you might not necessarily have thought about,
yeah,
which, as I have grown in my life, that has been something that I have acknowledged, that if someone is giving me criticism, it's not necessarily to my detriment, but it actually sometimes can be positive and helpful to give you a reframe of a different perspective.
yes,
But I definitely think that you have to be prepared for a good situation, a neutral situation, and a crisis situation. And most people, when they say, you know what, today's the day, I'm going to start posting on X social platform, I'm going to do this with my website, and I'm going to do all these X, Y, and Z, they're not necessarily thinking of what's the worst case scenario that can happen and how can I be prepared for that.
yeah,
Most people don't think that way,
yeah,
but it can happen, and you should be prepared, especially if you know that your company has a social media policy. Do you know what's in the policy?
mhm,
Are you protected? Are you yourself protected if you make the decision to start posting? Do you know what the repercussions would be for you, and what's a strategy around that?
yeah. Yeah, definitely lots to it. In terms of the types and styles of clients that you have now, you mentioned you branched out from automotive to IT. What's the breadth of your clientele look like now?
So it's interesting. I went to an automotive event last week, and it was the first one that I had been to in a few years. And I realized at that moment how much I know. I mean, I am fully aware of how much LinkedIn has opened up industries.
Yeah,
I'm working with consultants and coaches that are really industry agnostic.
mm,
I'm working with those in engineering, in aerospace. I work a lot in the B2B tech space.
mm,
I'm working with automotive. I'm working with leadership development coaches.
yeah,
I'm working with those who are, focused primarily in real estate or construction.
yeah,
So it's really, the industries that we've worked in are so vast. Health and fitness or health and wellness
yeah,
is another example. So there have been so many different spaces that I've operated in. I work with individual contributors. I also work with teams.
yeah,
I also work as a fractional, where if someone just needs somebody for a short period of time, I step in and help them until they're able to get to where they need to be. So it's really spread across, because what I do isn't just for one specific industry. It can go towards any industry. And I've spent a lot of time and energy kind of disassociating myself with the auto industry. Not that there's anything wrong with the auto industry, but for myself personally, I want to be able to work across industries. I want to be able to work with, I don't want to limit myself, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say is the biggest common challenge that you face when dealing with a net new client who kind of doesn't know what they want, doesn't really know what you do, but know that they need to do something? What's the biggest friction points?
Well, there's a couple. So I would say the first one is when I'm working with a client who, let's say they're a CEO or a president of an organization, and they do not have buy-in from their leadership team.
Right.
So that's a common one that happens. And I'm sure you experience this too. So that's number one. And then number two, the minutia of some of the creative aspects of the process. So when I'm working with someone and kind of just going through the creative process with them of how visually they want to identify online, and just kind of getting stuck and being in that rut of not really knowing what they want.
Yeah.
So those are the two, but the first one that I said is the one that happens more frequently.
Yeah. How do you typically navigate that? Is that something where you say these are some steps you need to take before we can move forward, or is it more that's when the coaching comes in?
Well, it's a combination of the discovery calls beforehand and having those conversations and making sure. I mean, you can have so many conversations, but if someone says their leadership team is bought in and they're completely not bought in, and you're already in, you know that it can go one of two ways. It's either going to work out or it's not. And if it's not going to work out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But just navigating that process and making sure that, just having the foresight to do the dance with everyone and make sure that everyone is really on the same page. And that's where some of the coaching comes in, but it's also just getting in alignment. And a lot of times, if it's a culture issue, then there's not much you could do about it other than just try to do the best that you can and to work through it to get closer to their goals and to kind of just move through it, unless there's massive roadblocks preventing you from being able to do the work that you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it can happen, and it's really common, of course, as well. So you also are branching out into being an author, and you have a book called Theatre of the Mind. What can you tell me about the book?
I love how you said that. So the book is a brainchild, essentially. It's a living, breathing document of exactly what we're talking about the stories that we tell ourselves about our capabilities actually have implications on our career, and they can the stories we tell ourselves can move ourselves forward, or they can keep us back, and we can watch others move forward. And so when I had the idea, so Theater of the Mind was a concept that a COO that I had worked for previously used to talk about in all of our leadership meetings, about how everything is really formulated in your mind, and it's all about perception. And whether you are speaking to your strengths in your content, as an example, is all determined by how you perceive yourself. And how you go to market as, as a coach, as, an executive. Even though we've had these successes, how we think about ourselves will actually have an impact on our career. And working through these mindset shifts of taking that narrative and rearranging it and making it come to life for others to see who believe it. And a lot of times, there's all different kinds of phrases, people talk about all the time about different types of fears and phobias and imposter syndrome, and it's all related. It all is. Because a lot of times when I'm dealing with someone, and I'm sure you have the same thing as a coach, you're dealing with people who have a tremendous amount of success and experience offline.
Yeah.
But when it comes to them posting, whether it's connecting it to their company, it's almost like this, it's a fear. And I see it mostly with those who are 40 and up. Not so much anyone under 40, but the clients that I'm working with are usually within that age range between, they'll say 40 and 65.
Yeah.
They've had tremendous careers without having to post on social, without having to promote their personal brand. And it's fascinating to watch some uber successful people have all this fear about going online and really showing and showcasing because they want it to look a certain way or feel a certain way. So they go through this whole analysis of themselves, which really stops them.
Yeah. So your book helps them realize what they're doing and provides solutions or potential solutions that might be a fit for them to move beyond that hurdle. Yeah.
So it's really designed for the person who's looking to go to market or who has been in that executive position and they want to get started. They don't know how to start. I include a lot of client case studies that I've worked with. I talk about what's worked, what hasn't worked, also different mindset shifts of how you can start reframing the way that you think about yourself and your brand, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's going to be coming out. So the manuscript is pretty much done. I would say probably around September timeframe, right after school comes back in session is when the book is going to be released.
Fantastic. I wish you all the very best when that comes.
Thank you. I will send you a copy.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. So this is, of course, the Best You podcast. And with that in mind, what's one regular practice that you employ that gives you the best opportunity to be the best version of yourself?
Oh, that's such a great question. Every day, I would say every morning for the most part, but it's every single day, I exercise for 90 minutes.
Right.
So I move, whether it's just walking and putting something on TV and just walking on the treadmill for 90 minutes, or I do an intense workout for 90 minutes. It's a non-negotiable in my day that I put it in my calendar. I do not take any meetings during that time. Usually I try to make it early in the morning before everyone else in my house is awake, but it definitely has helped me think, prepare, and kind of just get ready for the day that I have or the week or the month.
Fabulous. And it's obviously working. Melanie, where can people find out more about you and about the Borden Group?
So you can go to our website, which you can go to either melanieborden.com or humantobrand.com. They both redirect to the same place. Also on LinkedIn, you can look me up, or on Instagram as well.
Fabulous. This has been an absolute pleasure. I've learned lots. I'm really looking forward to seeing the book when it comes out. And once again, Melanie, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Gary.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.